same happened in Australia with the Aborigines that were, they fully understood that this was a dream world. They had a dream time that lasted for 40,000 years. And when we came there, we killed them off, even though we could have learned so much from them.
I made the point the other day that this world's backwards and upside down, so you have cultures like indigenous people, like Aborigines and Native Americans and the natives that have more of a spiritual advancement, you know, just like some of the Buddhists and so on and so forth. And then what seems to be the civilized ones that are coming to bring the civilization aren't advanced at all. And so again, it's just this whole, everything's backwards and upside down in this world. But in the end, the very best defense, so to speak, is no defense. You know, to be in innocence is to ultimately tap into that sense of invulnerability, not in terms of the world, you know, the body, the preacher man, his body still, you know, was killed. A lot of the prophets and saints, their bodies have been killed. Jesus, you know, very famous with crucifixion and so forth. But the presence that's underneath this, that's just identified as spirit, is invulnerable. There's no killing going on in eternity, there's no killing going on in the spirit realm, but we have to start to see that this world is a projection of the ego, and the ego is trying to displace the guilt, that more collective or ontological guilt, displacing it onto the world and using it as a trick, as a big trick to keep the mind stuck in the guilt. We present this light interlude from the Holy Spirit. As we're talking about massive collective guilt. It's about how serious it is to the Spirit. Yeah, keeping it light. Keeping it light. Yeah, the only reason we even seem to talk about it is just saying, don't gloss over it and just get into pretend with it, you know. It has to be exposed, but that's the only reason we talk about it. And then if you really hang with it, and there's a line in the Course that says, you know, the more you look at fear, the less you see of it. In other words, the more you go inward into the fear in your mind, the less you will perceive it, because it's exposed by looking at it. It's by not looking and distracting away and getting into all kinds of distractions and defense mechanisms. That's how you keep it, and that's how you see more of it, by not looking. By looking, you see less of it.
Does that include the conspiracy theory?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there was one point with conspiracy theories where my friend Jason, he was still rolling through this 9/11 thing and all the conspiracy theories about this and this and this, and he was a little concerned to bring it up with me because he didn't know what I was going to say, whether I would say, well, the buildings went down from the planes hitting the buildings, or if I would be open enough to say that no, it was part of a much deeper conspiracy, and there were charges and explosive on the inside, and it was all part of a grand design and everything. And I just left and I said, you know, you get deep enough in the mind and you see that in fact the buildings didn't go down. You know, that you can really start to see that it was all just part of a projection, and that trying to debate which way the buildings went down is part of the distraction, because you have to get the ego or the guilt underneath that made it seem as if there were buildings, there were towers. And certainly there's no terrorism in the world. It's the terror of the mind, afraid of love, afraid of waking up to God. That's what the terrorism really is. So you see how deep this goes. When he asked me the question, I just laughed and I said, well, can you see that both of those outcomes are actually identical? And he said, identical? I said, yep. Whether the plane hit it and it came down from a plane hitting it, or there were charges on the inside and a whole scheme and everything, those are both identical because they're just two projections of guilt. And so he wasn't expecting that answer. He was thinking I would go for one or the other and try to defend one or the other, and I said, oh, they're both the same. They're equally unreal. And the Twin Towers was kind of a symbol of the stock market and commercialism and run-amok capitalism, you know, towers in New York City and so on and so forth, and that central business district and everything. So the towers coming down could just be seen as a symbol of this ego game of the world, and money and commerce and everything starting to collapse and dissolve away. And people would say, well, yeah, there was a lot of lives, a lot of human beings that seem to go down in that, and it's like, well, that's why we have to go a lot deeper, because you can't meaningfully conclude anything from the surface. It's like going into a hall of mirrors and saying, I'm going to get a lot of good evidence at the circus in the hall of mirrors, you know, for what's really happening. Where all the mirrors are all curved and distorted, and you walk in front of one and the body balloons out and is really fat, and you walk in front of the next one and it's super skinny, tall and skinny, because you're not going to find any kind of accurate evidence in distortions. And when you start to see how distorted this world is, then it's very humbling. You start to say, okay, I'm going inside. I'm not going to draw conclusions based on the world.